Hi, and welcome to Parashat Korach, and I'm delighted to have with me in this week's Parashat interview Doron Yitzchak Gibor, originally from South Africa, now living in Tzfat,
Correct.
and real pleasure to have you on the episode.
Wonderful to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to in the last few years since you came to Tzfat.
Well, since I came to Tzfat, I think I'm still acclimatizing.
How long ago did you come to Tzfat?
It's been 4.5 years.
Uh-huh.
It's been 4.5 years. What have I been doing? I've been discovering who I am deep inside. I used to call myself a closet chassid because in my years of coaching, I was always pretty obsessed with not just Jungian psychology and the workings of the mind and the shadow, but also Kabbalistic principles. And I really delved into it, and I saw this beautiful overlap between Jungian psychology and shadow work and human breakthrough, human transformation, and the principles of Kabbalah and Hasidut. And so since I've been here, I've really been blending the two more, and I've sort of like come out of the closet, the Chassid closet, as I call it, and I look like a Jew now. So I suppose that's what I've been doing. But just really, I've never stopped coaching since I've come, and my practice of breakthrough and getting past unconscious blockages and patterns, that hasn't really stopped. I've delved deeper and specialized in certain niches, and then of course just living in this town. It's, there's a saying, you cannot put your hand into a jar of honey without honey sticking. You cannot live in Tzfat without the Kedusha and the holiness and the wisdom sticking. What I love about this place, besides the actual city and besides the actual topography and the air, is that I learn something from everyone every single day. Young, old, it doesn't matter who. I learn something from someone every single day, and I love it.
Wonderful. I've been hearing some wonderful things about people who have come to you for guidance and coaching, and there's been a turn. There's been an upping of your performance or your abilities. Can you explain to the layperson exactly what it is that you do and how you do it?
To the layperson, okay, sure. So there's a few ways to look at it, but if I had to choose one perspective of looking at it, and it's probably not just be one perspective, but just to grasp on a linear level, there are blockages. So I deal in breakthrough. Now, breakthrough, I discovered when I lived a little bit in America, breakthrough is not just a realization. A lot of people from America, specifically in South Africa, when we say breakthrough, people are like, oh, tell me more. Whereas in America, specifically, even a big realization is like, oh, we had a breakthrough, when we realize something. And that's not breakthrough. That's, at best, it's an aha moment, a big aha moment. And it may be enlightening, and it may infuse a person with hope and with like a sense of vision of what needs to happen and clarity, but it's not a breakthrough. And so what I mean by that, there are three inherent areas where there can be a blockage, and in order for there to be a breakthrough, there has to be a blockage. Now, a blockage can happen when any life instance is on repeat. There was a movie called Groundhog Day, where a guy was like waking up in the same day. No matter what he did, he woke up in the same day. And for many people, they feel that they're stuck in this Groundhog Day, that there's a pattern that keeps on repeating every few weeks, every few months, every few years. And the person says, you know what, after that pattern, like after they come out of it and they sort of like pick up the pieces and dust themselves off, sometimes they just make a promise to themselves, like, I will never be in that situation again. And then lo and behold, it repeats.
Right.
And so the source of these blockages and of these patterns is unconscious. That means it's not within a person's awareness. So what I've been doing for about 7-8 years now is I've been helping people delve into the unconscious mind to find the source or the roots of these blockages. And it's quite profound, because while there are three inherent blockages in Hasidus, it's called Banai, Chayai, Mezonai. So Banai means my children, so that would be a blockage and an inability to get into an intimate relationship. So if there's no intimate relationship, there are no banim, there are no children. The second one is chayai, and that would be my life. And you could look at it as the quality of my life. And in simple terms, that would be chronic illnesses. Not just illnesses like I've got the flu, I've got a cold, but chronic stuff. Chronic means that it doesn't go away. For those, chronic doesn't mean it's terrible, it just means it doesn't go away and it always comes back. So if a person's got diabetes, that would be a chronic disease. If a person's got IBS, that would be a chronic disease. If a person's got a skin disease, that would be a chronic disease. Chronic disease is something that modern medicine says, this is it, you're stuck with this. And then the last one, at least in the Banei Chai Mazonai, that would be Mazonai, which means my sustenance or my food, and commonly known that is a money block or an income ceiling. So the amazing thing is that while all of these areas they seem very separate and very different, the healing process and the road to breakthrough is identical. It's the same process. And without going into too much detail, it's all got to do with the voice inside the mind that says, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I'm a loser, or I'm a failure. People think, at least the majority of therapists, motivational speakers, books on self-development, and I found that a lot of Hasidim also, they call those words, those sentences, they call them lies. And so the strategy to deal with these negative sentences and negative affirmations, or this voice that's saying all these things, is to shout louder. So if the voice says, you're not good enough, then the advice is shout back, I am good enough. My name is whatever, and I am good enough. If it says, I'm not worthy, you say, I am worthy. And basically, you've got to shout louder.
Very good.
So when there's a voice inside the mind that's saying X, and then the person isn't told to shout Y, what's that called? When there's one person saying yes and the person saying no.
It's a conflict.
It's conflict, exactly. So that Eitzah, that advice, that strategy of shouting louder, essentially is creating inner conflict. And there
So
cannot.
which do you believe?
So the truth of the matter is, as uncomfortable as this may be, is that they're both true. Just like Hashem created night and day, good and bad, light and dark. You know, in a person's pH system, which is the most important measure of health, if there's a good pH system of between 7 and 7.3, and the acid is at that level, at that right level, there could be no disease, not heartburn, not arthritis, not even cancer. As long as the body has a healthy pH, there can be no disease. If you have disease, it means that somewhere in your body, it doesn't necessarily have to be the entire body, but let's say if a person's got gout, which is an inflammation in certain areas, then that means that in that specific area, there's like an acid tap that's on drip. And the body is the unconscious mind that's speaking, just like a dashboard in a car communicates with lights. The body communicates with pain and with disease. So the answer is that they're both true. They're both true. Just like the pH has got acid and alkaline. And if people just want everything to just be good, then that's the equivalent of saying, I want my body to just have alkaline, no acid. And unfortunately, if you've got no acid in your body, you die.
Yeah.
That would not be good. So it's the same thing that there's got to be, in shadow work, we call it integration. Integrating the shadow part so that a person becomes whole or complete. And so this is what I've been doing for the past 7 years, and Baruch Hashem, I've got a shita, I've got a method that is proprietary, and it's been working really, really well. Something that I developed that's sort of new to what would be called conventional shadow work, because there's not a whole mass amount of people that want to do shadow work and say, yeah, show me my pain, you know? People by nature want to gravitate towards pleasurable things.
Right.
Unfortunately, as we live in the master program that we live in is a yud and a hey and a vav and a hey, what that means is that there cannot be an aliyah, there cannot be an expansion without there first being a contraction. And what people that have been doing self-development for a while, they would know that whatever you resist will only persist.
Right.
And so what we do in shadow work is we're able to access that pocket of pain. We're able I explain to people and teach people where to put that specific negative, because every source of energy, let's take the most common source of energy that we know, let's say a battery. A battery is a source of energy and it has two poles. It has a positive pole and it has a negative pole. And each of these poles, they have a charge, a positive charge and a negative charge. The human being, it says in the Torah that the human being is a small world, and the world is a big man. You know, ha'olam hu adam gadol and ha'adam hu olam katan. So there's a correspondence. There's a Kabbalah. Kabbalah doesn't just mean receiving. It comes from the word hakbala, which means parallel. That there is a parallel and a correspondence between all levels of creation, on the physical plane, on the mental plane, on the emotional plane, and on the spiritual plane. So if there is this parallel, and a battery, which is a source of energy, has both a negative pole and a positive pole, that must mean that the human being, I, you, we're sources of energy, because every person's got their own unique creative energy, their own creative expression that has to come from inside of them. And so that would make the human being the equivalent of a living battery. And so as a living battery, there's got to be a positive pole and a negative pole.
But they just have to be balanced.
They have to be balanced, and there's a catch here. There's a catch. So in nature, there is this thing called photosynthesis.
Yeah.
And what that means is that plants and vegetation, they gravitate towards the light. Okay, so the human being also has the same type of what I call emotional photosynthesis, where the image, the self-image, the ego, the sense of self, it gravitates towards the light. I want to be the best me, like every time a person gets dressed, you don't get dressed based on your shadow self. You get dressed based on your light self-image. I want to look good like this. This suits me. This is my taste. That whole thing is a sense of self. And so that sense of self is gravitating towards the light, towards pleasure. It's just a factory setting, if you want to call it that. But what that means is that because there is a gravitation towards the light, that means that there is a gravitation away from the darkness, from the pain.
Right.
And what that gravitation away from the darkness means in human terms is denial of my shadow. So it's not only that everyone's got a shadow self. By the time it takes for a person to actually realize I've got a shadow self and I need to do my shadow work, they've got to actually somehow pierce or circumvent or cancel or nullify their own denial. And that's a very, very humbling experience. And as we're going to speak about with Korach, the one thing that he was missing was this humility, this beetle.
Well, let's talk about that, because it's amazing that you've come specifically at Korach, because what I want to do with you is to explore the blockage that Korach had and why he had that blockage and how it manifested in this way. And how we can learn how to avoid those sort of blockages in our lives today. So let's talk about it. There appears to be three main antagonists to Moshe. There's Korach, there's the Datan and Aviram, and there's the 250 leaders of the sages say predominantly were the firstborns of the different tribes, who all felt that they were missing something. Korach was missing the fact that he was missed out because Moshe elected Eliphaz, who was the son of Uziel, the fourth son of Kehat, over Korach, who was the son of the second son, Itar, and felt he was missing out. The Datan and Aviram had their own issue, which I want to explore about, because it seems to be different to that of Korach's. And then obviously the Reuven, the head of the firstborns, had a problem with the fact that they lost their Bechor to Joseph, and then all the firstborns lost their priesthoods to the Levites. So everybody felt as if they were missing out something. And it's fascinating to see the language of Korach, as he says to Moshe and Aaron, Ravrachem, you have got too much. He's looking at them and he's saying, you have too much power. And it's fascinating to see Moshe's answer, which is which is like, haven't you got enough? And it's this idea of wanting more than you have and not being grateful with what you have. So off the first bat, I mean, how would you analyze Korach's mindset when he brings himself into this position of conflict?
Okay, so it's an excellent question. So, first of all, it's really important to understand that Korach didn't just go up and collect and round up a whole bunch of angry people. Okay, it's said that if Korach was alive today, every single one of us would have believed what he said and would have followed him. He was that convincing, and he wasn't just saying nothing. He wasn't just saying nonsense. He was saying really, really pertinent stuff that had a lot of truth to it. And as we'll go into it, we'll see that, like, what he was talking about was actual real truth that made sense on every single level. And what he was talking about, essentially, he was talking about the virtue or the mala of gvura and gvurot over chesed and chasadim. He wanted to reveal the shoresh, the source of gvurot, and how that it comes from a higher place. Because in today's world, in this master program that we live in of Yud K and Vav K, that there has to be a Yerida before an Aliyah, and the ramifications of this requirement by the master system for there to first be a contraction and then an expansion. In fact, the expansion cannot happen without the contraction that not only precedes it but creates it. You know, if I give you a bow and an arrow, and I'll say to you, make the arrow fly, but don't pull it back, don't create a tension in the bow. It's like you say that's impossible. If I give you a spring and I say make this work, but don't contract it, you're like, well, what am I going to do with it? The whole point of the spring is for it to have a contraction. The whole point of the string on the bow is for there to be a tension. And once there is this tension, this contraction, then there can be an expansion. And the ramifications go forever, because I deal with shadow work, and the original shadows happen in childhood. And by who? By parents. So one of the holiest, and I'm sorry to tell this, parents, but this is the truth, but one of the holiest duties that, I won't say holy, but probably sacred in terms of like what's going on for the longer term, is that one of the duties of a parent is to wound the child.
Is to?
Wound the child.
Is it?
Yes. Because without the wounding, there is no purpose as an adult. So if you look at the archer, the archer's job, his only input is to create attention.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
And once he lets go, that's it. His job is done. He does not make the arrow go forward. The laws make the arrow go forward. So in Hasidic terms, there's an iskafia, like a subjugation from the word kfiyah. It's forced. The contraction is forced. But then once there's a point of release, there's an ithabcha, where all of that negative tension, all of that build-up becomes a positive. Now, negative does not mean bad. This is really, really important, people. Negative in actual terms does not mean bad, and positive does not mean good, because if that were the case, all battery sellers, manufacturers, they would take off the bad part and sell you just the positive polarity if negative actually meant bad. So what negative means, it means that which I don't want. Positive means that which I do want. Or to say it another way, positive is what it is, and negative is what it's not. Okay, so if I was to say that my favorite finger is my thumb, I've told you in a positive manner what it is. But if I said to you that my favorite finger is not this one, not this one, not this one, and not that one, I've told you the same thing. I've just told you in a negative way. Right? So the archer wants the arrow to go forward, but he doesn't make it go forward. In fact, he makes it go back. And there is this relationship between the negative and the positive with building and construction, the depth of the foundations and the height of the building. And the saying in Jungian psychology is, where I am the most wounded as a child, I am the most accomplished as an adult.
Interesting.
Okay?
Yep.
It's like a negative imprint. Remember Kodak, right? So Kodak worked on this exact principle, is that there would be a flash of light that would make an imprint on the what film?
The negative.
The negative. And then after there was a process of transformation or development that happens in what room?
Dark room.
A dark room full of shadow. After that, the person says, here you go. He's now inverted the inverted. Taken the negative, inverted it, and here you go, here's the positive. And even if the positive picture gets ruined, as long as you got the negative, as long as you got the original imprints, it can be developed again.
So tell me what Korach was trying to say.
So what Korach was trying to say was that there is this advantage. There is that the negative, the contraction, the gvurot, they should take a precedence over the chasadim, and that he wanted to reveal the source, because if you had like a shelf with like lowest level and then highest level, and the shelf were to, let's say, just fall like that much, what was on the lowest level would fall close to the shelf, and what was on the highest level would fall further away. And this is what happens, that things that are on a higher level in the spiritual worlds, once there's the Yerida to this world, the higher things, they fall farther away. And they have more potential. So he was talking about the shoresh of Gvurot is at a higher place. He wanted to reveal that. And that's why he was so convincing. What he was saying was so real and so true. Because again, we live in a world of, before the Geula, no pain, no gain. His problem was, and you mentioned this, was the gratitude. And the gratitude is probably the most important thing that a person can have in development, in a happy living. It says in the Torah, Ezu Ashir, Hasamech Bechilko, that a person is wealthy when they're happy with their lot. There's also another way to translate is that how do you become wealthy? And that's by focusing on what you got and filling up your whole energy body with gratitude. And then there's a law that perpetuates what you got, because thoughts are electro, but emotions are magnetic. So thoughts is what you put out into the ether, but your emotion is what you magnetize, is what you pull into your experience. So the problem, as it were, the problem of Korach, his blockage, if you want to call it that, was that he didn't have bittul, he didn't have the humility, he didn't have the self-nullification. If he had so much potential, he had crazy potential, because first of all, he was a Levi. Second of all, his name, Korach, you could look at it as Kireach. And one of the things that the Levim had to do is they had to take a blade and had to make themselves bald. They had to make themselves completely Kireach, their whole bodies. This was his name. There's also other interpretations that it was Kol Ruach, that he was he had a cold spirit, and it was Koreach, meaning like a Rokeach, which is like someone that plans something, or Chakar, someone that investigates and schemes. But essentially, he had massive potential to be something really, really, really holy. And had he had the bittul to listen to Moshe and to nullify his own desires and to be grateful for what he had, it would have been phenomenal.
But let's look at his claim. His claim is, I see this claim as an argument for communism, because he's saying that everybody's equal. And because God said that you are all a nation of priests and kingdom of nations, so you're all that. So why do you, Moshe and Aaron, lift yourself up above the rest of us? It's a call for equalness and communism almost. And Moshe is saying, yeah, but if God wanted to create a communistic society, he would have made us that, but he didn't. He made Leviim above the Israels, and he made the Kohen Gadol above the Levi. So God himself, in his structure for Bnei Israel, wanted some sort of hierarchy. Although we do have, if you look at the way that the 12 tribes were camped around the Mishkan, they were all equidistant from the Mishkan, which means that there is a great deal of equalness that goes on, but within that there's still a hierarchy. Absolutely. So where's the fault in Korach's move that there should be no hierarchy, or is that not what he's saying?
I don't know if that's what he's saying. Personally, it could have been that he was saying that we're all holy. And it was, and on some level, it is true, because we do talk about achdut all the time, and we say vayichin sham, vayichin shanam ha'am, ish echad kalev echad. So there is power in achdut, but it was the Bnei Israel themselves that begged Moshe after the second commandment, saying like, no, please, you do it. We can't handle this. Right. So they instituted themselves. They instituted a hierarchy. Right. So, and that the initial hierarchy was always going to be that there was going to be a sacred bunch and a let's call it less sacred bunch, right. And that was going to be the Bechor, the firstborns were going to have the avodah of the Kohanim, and even in Egypt we see that Shevet Levi, that were considered the Kohanim, they were not enslaved.
No.
They were not enslaved. They were recognized by everyone as priests. So they're by nature, there has to be a separation between, or a distinguishment between holy and not holy. That's what kadosh actually means, separated or distinguished. And funny enough, that's what Korach was actually, that was one of his motives, was to distinguish, because the power of distinguishment or of differentiation happened on Monday, right?
Yeah.
On Monday. Monday was the day that there was a Vayim Mavdil Bein Mayim Lemayim, that Hashem separated between the upper waters and the lower waters. And it doesn't. And in Bereshit on Monday, it does not say there Vayar Kitov, because by separating, by introducing the energy of separation and distinguishment, it's important, because there cannot be something holy if everything's holy. There's got to be, at least in our current paradigm before the Geula, there's got to be something where this is holy and this is not holy.
Kadosh means to separate.
Yes, Mekudash, Lakdish means to dedicate it. Exactly, it means separated. It means dedicated. So, like, if you've got to have your Shabbos clothes. You've got to have your Shabbos. It's got to be separated. It's got to be holy. That means separated. And the whole point of separation, or the whole energy of separation, came on Monday, which was the day of Gvurot. And again, this is talking about. It goes to the point of what Korach was trying to bring about. It was about revealing the shorish of the Gvurot and how holy it is. So again, it said that if we were there, we would have been part of the 250 people.
And we see in the Psukim how difficult it was for Moshe to separate the Jewish people from the rebels. He had to work very hard to do that because they were so persuasive. But I'm still struggling to understand what it was that he was trying to persuade us to think.
So his ultimate goal was this mutiny of jealousy. That's I believe.
Yeah.
That was his ultimate goal. The way that he was doing it was by talking actual sense, by showing people how things work, bashetach, as we say, like on the ground. The thing is that the whole dynamic of pain first and then gain, right? Or the sur meira and then the aseh tov, the contraction and then the expansion. This is not where we come from, and it's not what's going to be. So in Gan Eden, which is a reality that we're going to move towards when there's the Geula Shlema, there was no pain and then gain. Pregnancy would happen. No, pregnancy wouldn't happen. There'd be birth instant. There'd be no gestation. There was no gestation period. There was no there was no gestation period. There was no pain. There was no evil. The ramifications are massive. That means that parents wouldn't have to wound children, so there wouldn't be a negative imprint, and people could have their purpose without there being the negative imprint, right? So that means, like, to use another example, that means that the camera could just take the camera without there being the negative, which I suppose is what we've got now with the digital cameras.
Right.
We could look at digital cameras as messianic.
Right. Nice.
But we know that that's not the ultimate, because on the level of neshama, it's the expansive sfirot that come before the contractive sfirot. So chokhmah, which is tell me more, comes before bina, which is whoa, enough. Let me get my head around it. Chesed, which is unstoppable and unconditional love, comes before the gvurot, which is like whoa, just these are my boundaries. Netzach comes before hod. So we know that on the level of the neshama, that there is expansion before contraction. And that's sort of where we come from, Gan Eden, and Bezrat Hashem, that's where we're going to go with the Geula Shlema.
Right. But just imagine, for example, that you're Korach's spokesperson, right? And the audience is Bnei Israel. What do you say to them that is different to what Moshe is saying? What is Korach actually saying that the people are so gravitated towards?
Well, I wasn't there.
Just imagine.
I would imagine that he was talking about a type of communism, a type of equality, a type of by eliminating hierarchy, then we can all be important. We can all one of these shadow beliefs is I don't matter. And as long as there's, let's say, a king and then a deputy king and there's this whole hierarchy, then maybe I'm just a peasant and maybe I also don't matter. So I don't know. But what I do know is that it's not as simple as the Mikra says, and that he was really, really convincing. He was really, really convincing.
Well, he had to be convincing because he was, let's think in modern terms, he was well educated, very, very sharp-minded,
Very wealthy.
very wealthy,
Very wealthy.
high, the third highest position, if you like, the bearer of the ark. I mean, you know, that's a huge responsibility. He had everything. He's like the equivalent of, I don't know what, I don't know, Bill Gates or someone like that who can do anything he wants, and yet he fell. So that's why I was thinking that there must have been a blockage there somewhere. He had all those assets and all that potential,
Right.
And what made him trip? And you're saying that is what the missing part is, the gava, the humility.
Right. What the Lubavitcher Rebbe says in Torah Menachem in Chassidus is that he was missing the beetle. He was missing his own self-nullification. On the subject of shadow, Rabbi Nachman in the Likutei Moharan, Torah Kuf Ayin Bet, he says that Hashem's light is shining all the time, and the only thing that, in order for there to be shadow, not just in the mind, just anywhere, there has to be an obstruction of light.
Right.
So what he says, what Rabbi Nachman says in Likutei Moharan, Kuf Ayin Bet, is that what creates an obstacle or a obstruction of light, if this is the light, what creates the obstruction of light is, number one, a person's own deeds, that they become something actually tangible that create a shadow. But it's also a sense of I. That the sense of the ego. So I want to be careful, like the word ego, it conjures up in people's minds. As soon as they hear ego, they think of someone who's like boisterous or someone who's arrogant. And that's not really the case. That person may be egotistical. But ego or echo, it just means self in Greek and Latin. So the sense of self, the sense that I have when I spoke about before, like I like this food, that I is the sense of self. I like these clothes, that I is a sense of self, and that's what is the separateness. Rabbi Yitzchak Gibor in his book Body, Mind, and Soul, he talks about how the cause of diseases, which would fall under Chaya, the cause of diseases is a separateness from Hashem. I was thinking about this the other day, that what does that actually mean? Because in Gan Eden there was no sickness, and in the Geula there's going to be no sickness, and at Matan Torah everybody got healed.
Right.
So what does this actually mean? That there's a separateness from Hashem. So it says in Tanya that the Yid is a chelek elokah mimal mamash, and that there's every neshama, I think even non-Jews, there's a spark there of godliness, depending on which world it's from. There's many opinions, but this spark that comes into a person's awareness as something like very, very fine or very distant, and it's very far away from my sense of who I am. So if I can love, hate, be proud of, if I can do any verb to myself, that must mean that there's the subject of the subject of the verb, the I that's doing the loving, that's doing the hating. But then there must be also the object of this verb, which is the self. And so as long as there is a distance between this I and the self, and there has to be, because of the separation, because of the shadow self, the shadow part of the mind, the unconscious, because there's got to be, if a person was just pure light, there could the sense of I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, it couldn't penetrate. It couldn't come in. And that's why at Matan Torah there was like, how can there be a sense of separation when like Hashem is right there and permeating absolutely everything? So this sense of self is what causes shadow, and this is the ani, the aleph nun yud, as opposed to the ayin, which is the same letters, the no thing. So Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Nachman's main student, he speaks about the sentence that says melo chol haaretz kavoda, which means melo from the word maleh, means that Hashem's kavod, his honor, fills the whole earth. Melo chol haaretz kavoda, melo from maleh. But Rabbi Natan says actually no. If you look at it as from me, from a place of, like from, lo, not, as in nothing, from a place of nothing, or what we can call bitul hayesh, when a person is able to nullify themselves, then the obstruction of light is no longer there. And all that's left is Hashem's shefa, Hashem's light, and that would be we can call that enlightenment, we can call that yichud, we can call that geula or geula pratit.
Okay, so let's. I mean, it was fascinating to hear how, according to the Alshach, Moshe completely neutralized Korach's claim by appealing to all the Levites and said, "Listen, guys, you yourself were elevated from regular Jews to priesthoods, and you accepted that honor, that aliyah. So how can you be against Aaron, who was given that aliyah from you? Isn't that hypocritical? And speak to Korach, because you're all in a state of privilege." And that kind of nullified Korach. And then you have, Moshe turns to Datan and Aviram, and they have a different claim. They lash at Moshe, saying, you took us out of the place of milk and honey, meaning Egypt, and you didn't bring us to the place of milk and honey, and even if you gorge out our eyes, we're not going to follow you. And it seems to be an attack on Moshe as opposed to a request to rise up to priesthood. Do you see a difference there between their approach and Korach's?
Yeah, I do, because Korach on some level had an interest of Kedusha. He wanted to be a Kohen. He wanted to get closer to Hashem, right? Datan and Aviram, I can't remember where I heard it from, but Datan comes from the word dat, which means religion. And religion, if people are not connected to the truth, religion can seem very indoctrinating and very sort of like, you listen to me, you do this, and very sort of guilt-driven. And Aviram is like the father of a big nation. These people were like, they wanted to be celebrities. They wanted to like have power, but not necessarily to get closer to Hashem the way that Korach did. And the truth be told is that Korach, while Hashem took the whole claim more personally as if it was like to him, because it was to Moshe, it was like an attack on Moshe. Right. And whenever there was any attack on Moshe, Hashem was very quick to protect Moshe, like with Aaron and Miriam when they spoke about him. He said like all other prophets, they've got a dream about me or like understand riddles, whereas Moshe like we just speak face to face. And so while Korach and his whole clan, they got quite a big punishment.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So you can cut it down.
No.
So while Korach and his clan really got a big punishment, the truth of the matter is that Korach got forced into arguably the greatest and longest tshuva that anyone will ever do since the beginning of time.
That's right.
Okay? Because apparently if you know where the place is in the desert, you can go there and actually hear him saying, Moshe emet v'torato emet, that Moshe's truth and his Torah's truth, and like he's been doing this for thousands of years, right? And it says in Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat, which is actually who wrote that? I think it says some people say Adam wrote it, some people say that Avram wrote it, but it's miyuchas. It's in the chapters of Moshe, right? In the tzaddiks in Tehillim in the 90s. Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat. It says towards the end, it says tzaddik katamar yifrach, right? That a righteous person, like a palm, will sprout or will bloom. And if you look at the Sofei Tevot, the last letters of tzaddik is a kuf, katamar is a resh, yifrach is a chet. It's Korach. Wow. And so it's already in prophecy that he will get a great kavod because of the crazy long and relentless tshuva that he's been doing for thousands of years.
So one thing that I'm puzzled about, I mean, Lord Jonathan Sachs brings it out, and ostensibly we think that Korach wants the Kohen Gadol, and yet Moshe takes it as a full frontal attack on him, and Datan and Aviram attack him personally, and Hashem takes it personally, and so Moshe says, "May Hashem prove to you that I was divinely appointed by creating something that has never been happened before, namely the earth swallowing Korach." And what's fascinating to me is that didn't quell the rebellion. We have this incredible miracle which sort of sealed the matter, and it doesn't, and there's still this lingering belief in Bnei Israel that they want to aspire to that level of priesthood. And the Alshach says that part of that, feeding that, was the fact that Moshe instructed when the 250 were killed, he instructed the sons of Aaron to bring all the censers and hammer them into a roof over the ark. And so the people thought, okay, so it must be that the sin of these people was unintentional, and therefore there must be some justification to it. And there's still, it's amazing to me that after that miracle of the earth swallowing and the fire coming and killing the 250, we still have a revolution on our hands. And why is it that miracle doesn't work?
We could ask that same question about the Jews in Egypt. It seems to be that Jews are numb to supernatural miracles, right? So we can go back to in Egypt when there was the 10 plagues, and those plagues happened over a course of a year, and then they got to the sea, and we read about in the Haggadah that there was actually like 250 miracles all in all, and like the sea split and everything split, and it says in commentaries that they still carried little idols. There was still someone that still carried little idols just in case. I mean, you could think to yourself, like, it's not just like one miracle, right? Besides, there were two. The real proof was that on Aaron's stick an almond came about, right? And the shaked is the same as shakdan, which means diligent and quick. It grows the quickest. But you could say, but even that, it was one miracle. Whereas in Egypt there was hundreds, literally hundreds, the 10 plus the 250 and everything. And it was only when they crossed the sea, which in itself is like, hello, that's a miracle in its own self. It was only when they crossed the sea, and then the seas came down and actually killed the Egyptians. And we say in Vayosh Hashem Bayom Hahu, it's Yisrael Mitzrayim, it says Vayar Yisrael et Mitzrayim met asvasayam, that the Israelites saw with their eyes, they were able to perceive the very bully, the very slave master that was whipping them and that was threatening them and that they were scared of. It was only when they saw their threat actually dead, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe avdo. It was only then they were able to believe in Hashem and in Moshe's servant. So it's almost like there's some sort of like, you want to talk about blockages? I don't know, but there's some sort of numbness, some sort of like anti-perception going on. So it just seems that in our history that these supernatural miracles, they don't really seem to like do as much as we would think, at least logically, which is a mystery in its own right.
It is, and what's I think you read even after that there's the plague and Hashem gets really upset and 14,700 people die. I mean, this is not a small matter. But what's fascinating is that what stops the plague is the censer of Aaron. Moshe instructs Aaron to take his incense, and that blocked the disease, as it were, the plague. And we learn from that the incense is the only thing, one of the main things that can block the Satan progression. And the Alsha says that there are several diseases that are spiritual diseases that the only way to deal with them is to surgically remove them, and that's what Korach's the miracle with Korach was, to surgically remove that. And it's interesting that further proof that Aaron was supposed to be Kohen Gadol was his action that stopped the plague progressing. And I thought that was quite kind of interesting. But is there any, I mean, you're a gematria guy, is there any gematria to the 14,700 that you've seen?
I'm not on that level of 14,700s. I can do like tens and like maybe to the hundreds sometimes, but that's a bit above my pay grade.
Or maybe 147.
Possibly. I have to get some thoughts. Put me on the spot at the moment.
So, okay, so I think we're coming up towards the end of our allotted time, unfortunately. But when you read Korach, is there anything there that really strikes you that we haven't mentioned?
That's a good question. That we haven't mentioned. No, I think we covered everything. I think what stands out for me the most was that Moshe asked for a severe punishment. That's probably what stands out for me the most as the most irregular thing.
Yeah, the Alshas brings it up. He said it's so unusual for Moshe not to pray for his flock, even the sinners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what stands out for me, that he asked for the most severe punishment. But even then we see that the Chasadim of Hashem is that like Korach is actually going to be reinstated on some level in the time of the Geula. Tzaddik Tamarifrach. So yeah.
But the Alshas says something very interesting on that as well. He says that really the surgical removing of Korach in a miraculous way was done so that the Jewish people will know that Moshe's appointment was in a miraculous way, like divine, and that had God not done that, then there would have been a disintegration of the Jewish people, and the purpose of the world would have ceased. So his surgically removing Korach was actually an act of kindness. That's how he describes it. So yeah, it's been fascinating to reveal some of these dark shadows of around Korach. So as a final thing, would you give us a blessing for all our viewers in light of all of this? What blessing would you give us?
Absolutely. So you mentioned at the very beginning that I've been through an upgrade in my abilities, and I'm going to give a bracha according to that. Is that the mind, the human mind, when the neshama is in the body, it's subject to a duality of conscious mind and unconscious mind, yin and yang, light and dark, pleasure, pain. The conscious mind wants pleasure and quality, and the unconscious mind wants familiarity and just not to die. So let's call it, the conscious mind wants quality and the unconscious mind wants quantity. And that's a duality, but there is a third part of the mind. And this third part is called the superconscious, or the keter, the al-muda. And this part is a place of singularity that is above this duality. And lately I've been zoche to access this part of the mind, and I'm seeing the timeline that it normally takes to go through the shadow and to achieve this healing, to achieve a breakthrough. That these timelines, they collapse because the al-muda, the superconscious, exists in a place where there is no time. And by the way, the very the hole in the earth that swallowed up Korach and Adato, this was created before creation. It was all the supernatural things were created before creation. So this whole thing was like, it was going to play out, and it had to play out the way it made out. So it wasn't just we can read it chronologically. But there's no orders of the Torah, and time is not linear. So what I've been experiencing with the superconscious healing is that it can circumvent processes that are chronological. It can circumvent this the whole world of duality, and it can go straight to the point and just instruct it, like, for people to understand, it's like ChatGPT for the soul. It really is. Once there's a connection there, it just follows instructions, as long as the instructions are pure from a place of truth and there's permission. There has to be permission from the other person, so it's not invasive. But the healing is instant, and this is what I've been seeing lately. With I'm close to 50 people already in up leveling my skill and really just getting a good feel for it. The results have been absolutely phenomenal, like instant healing. Things that would normally take a month or 2 months have been happening in the space of a week. And so my bracha is this, that everyone should understand that there is a time for chronology, there is a time for process, but there also is a time for singularity healing. And that singularity, whereas duality, there is love and hate and fear and trust. In the singularity, it's ach tov v'chesed. It's just good, and it's just kindness, and it's just pure love. And Bezrat Hashem, we should all be zoche to experience that love, first on the inside, and then on the outside, and then for the whole world in the Geula Shlema.
And if someone wants to contact you, I know you do a lot of work remotely as well. How do they contact you?
You can, first of all, you just Google, the things come up in Google, Google my name, but I've got a website called breakthroughmatrix.com, and DoronYitzchak.com as well. But again, just a lot of things come up with Google.
Wonderful. Doron Yitzchak, thank you so much for being my
Bless you,
guest.
friend.
And may you be blessed to continue to grow in your skills and helping people and healing people.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.